Welcome to the first NHL Power Rankings of 2024, or just week 12 of the NHL season. And actually, speaking of which, if you happen to hear any background noise, that's what's going on there. I am recording this in the last hour of 2023, going into 2024, and I know, lame, I'm not at some New Year's Eve party, but honestly, I've never really been that into New Year's Eve as a holiday. Doesn't mean you have to agree, but yeah, I really don't mind recording this as it turns to the new year. And also, yes, as you probably noticed, I am wearing a jersey for, I'm pretty sure, the first time in one of these Power Rankings videos. I don't really know why I haven't been, but either way, I'm wearing it for a couple of reasons. One, today is also the Winter Classic, or the day that I'm releasing this video, so obviously I had to go ahead and wear the better of the two Winter Classic jerseys, and this is clearly that. Also, with the first honorable mention, I've got the Seattle Kraken. Joey Decord's been great, the team's playing well, they've got points in their last 8 games to get back to NHL 500. Okay, so I can't actually have them here just yet, but they have been playing better, so hopefully they can keep that up here in the Winter Classic against Vegas today. With the real first honorable mention, though, back in a spot that they have been in quite a number of times over the course of these Power Rankings this season, I have the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, for the Hurricanes, it's been a bumpy road, even though they have been playing generally pretty well. At least their 5-on-5 stats look very good. But they have finally started to turn that into some wins, with 3 wins in this last week, going 3-0-0, and 2 pretty convincing ones to start it off against Nashville and Montreal, then finishing it up with another regulation win, 3-2 over Toronto. So obviously only time will tell whether or not this means that Carolina has finally got things going. Obviously their goaltending finally playing well is a big factor in that, but at least it is a good start, and they've been hovering around the top of their division already, so if they can get on a bit of a run here, they could easily find their way moving up into this top 10 in the weeks to come. Meanwhile, with the second honorable mention is the New York Islanders, who are kind of headed in the wrong direction, at least this week anyway, with 2 losses to Pittsburgh. The first one is the one that really does the damage, a 7-0 loss there, and they did have a pretty big 5-1 win over DC in between those 2 losses, but it was enough for me to just bump them down the 1 spot from 10th last week and bump up a team that honestly they're right neck and neck with in the Philadelphia Flyers, who do now take that 10th spot. For the Flyers, they also had 2 losses this week, though one of them was in overtime, having lost their last 2 games, but they beat Vancouver to start things off, a 4-1 pretty nice victory there, and then end up losing in overtime on the second half of the back-to-back to Seattle the night after, which is a hot Seattle team that's playing better than their record suggests right now. I can say that with some confidence, even though they earned that record. And yes, I know that they did lose 4-3 to cap things off this week to the Flames in regulation, which is not necessarily a great loss, but at least it's close. Certainly a lot closer than 7-0 or even 3-1 like the 2 losses the Islanders had. Again, these 2 teams are pretty neck and neck, and I just feel like the Flyers had a slightly better week, and even if it wasn't a great one, they did play NHL 500 on a West Coast road swing. I mean, I suppose I could have just moved the Canes up into the 10th spot and then had these 2 as the honorable mentions and not had to decide between the 2, but I still do feel like the 2 of these teams have played better to this point in the season, and certainly more consistently getting better goaltending than the Canes, so I think it's deserved that one of the 2 of them should get the 10th spot. Besides, if I was just going off of the last week or the last 2 weeks, then teams like the Kraken or certainly the Oilers would be more likely to be on this list than some of the teams that are here. But that's just not how I've decided to do these power rankings, and it doesn't really tell the full story of the full season. It's just a team that got hot for a week or 2. Anyway, moving on to the 9th spot, I have the Colorado Avalanche. Now, I know the Avalanche are moving down after going 2-0-1 this week, but a lot of teams on this list had pretty good weeks, and there's a team that jumped above them that certainly had a better one. Besides, the 2 wins for the Avs are a 3-1 win over San Jose and a 2-1 win over St. Louis, which obviously means the Avs are doing pretty good at keeping the puck out of their own net, but it's the Sharks and the Blues, and look, I know the Blues are currently in a playoff spot and have been playing off and on pretty well, but I'm still not convinced this is going to be a playoff team at the end of the season. I mean, they did score some goals in the game against Arizona to start the week off, but then they blew that lead and lost it in overtime to the Coyotes. So yeah, just not the most convincing week from the Avs, even though the points in the standings look pretty good at the end of it. Now, with all that being said, I don't think this goal scoring problem for the Avs is going to last all that long, as they are still the second best team when it comes to goals for per game, so it's just a little bit of a drier patch, and especially if they can keep up this defense and goaltending they've got over the last 2 games anyway, they should be able to really start to put those wins together and work their way back into the top 5, where honestly I think they belong. Or should eventually be. For now, at least though, the team that jumped them up into the 8th spot in the Florida Panthers certainly had a better week, and also has the record to back up the strong season that they've had. In fact, they might have had the best week, second best week of any team on this list. And yeah, this team just continues to find ways to win. I don't know how many times I can say the same things about how they only have 3 guys scoring goals, and they're actually towards the bottom of the league in goals for per game, but they're doing a very good job of keeping the puck out of their net enough where they're winning a lot of their games. So yeah, ultimately with this team, it just comes down to that. Their ability to consistently find ways to win games, which is exactly what good teams do, especially when it's through the struggles that they've had, in this case, scoring on a consistent basis. And even there, that might be partially due to some bad luck, as they are currently 3rd worst in the league when it comes to goals scored above expected, currently sitting just above -14, only better than the Sharks and Ducks. Up next in the 7th spot, and only hanging on to the 7th spot because of a close last game win over a good Kings team who have started to slide a little bit, so we'll see how long that lasts. But at least for now, the Kings are one of the better teams, and the Golden Knights in the 7th spot did finish off their losing streak by beating that Kings team. Even still, they started off their week and returned from the Christmas break by getting blown out by the Ducks. Honestly, I probably should just keep moving them down since they're clearly about to lose the Winter Classic, but I'll stick with results that have actually happened, and, well, I don't want to jinx it, so maybe they'll win it. But either way, it hasn't been a convincing last few weeks for the Golden Knights, but they are still riding the highs of the start of the season, and they still are picking up their wins here and there, like this one against the Kings, to keep that record looking good and that point total high as they continue to challenge for the top of a competitive Pacific Division. At least among the top 3 teams anyway. Now, obviously it certainly helps for the Golden Knights that they did get Thompson back after just missing the 2 games. Thankfully for them, he was not out very long, especially with Hill already missing a chunk of time. But he did come right back and give up 5 goals to the Ducks, so it wasn't a smooth return. Either way, I think Golden Knights fans are happy to have at least one of their 2 starting goaltenders back in net. Moving on though to the 6th spot, I have the Dallas Stars, who also didn't necessarily start off their week particularly convincingly, as they did lose 2-1 to the Blues, who I already said I don't have a ton of confidence in spite of being in a wildcard spot. And then they were taken to overtime by the Blackhawks. Now they won in overtime 5-4, and they made up for that by then stomping the Blackhawks in their final game of the week 8-1. Which, with that 8-1 win, they do take over 2nd place in the NHL in goals for per game. It hadn't updated for the Avalanche when I said they were 2nd, so the Avalanche are actually 3rd now, but either way, the Stars are definitely scoring a lot of goals. Currently now have 6 10-goal scorers already on the season, and 2 more guys sitting at 9 goals, so this is a team that is not only starting to score quite a bit, but they're doing it by committee and with depth, which is certainly the way that you'd prefer to have it. Or, at least in my opinion anyway. Obviously, the Oilers have gotten away with a lot of success, having just 3 guys score most of their goals. The playoffs are a different story, but usually you still like to have some depth, and the Stars are definitely getting that. And besides, at the other end of the ice for the Stars, it has to be pretty encouraging that even with your starting goaltender in Ottinger having missed some time now, Wedgwood has stepped up and been pretty fantastic in net for them. I mean, 1 goal in 2 different games this week, and in general, over the time that Ottinger's missed, he has been fantastic stepping into that starting role, and having played every game since Ottinger went out. As we move into the top 5, we start in the 5th spot with a team that has moved down into this 5th spot after a few weeks of being right up in the top 3 and even flirting with potentially taking that top spot from the Rangers. But it's been a tougher couple of weeks, and the Kings have started to slide a little bit here. Now, it still wasn't necessarily a terrible week for the Kings. They do go 500 on the week with a pretty convincing win over the Sharks, but the Sharks have kind of gone back to being the Sharks from the start of the season. Maybe not quite that bad, but certainly not the Sharks that we saw in November. And then they lost to Vegas in regulation, which is a team that they're again in that kind of 3-horse race for the Pacific win with. And then lost in the shootout, so basically a tie, but to Edmonton. Now, Edmonton's hot and starting to finally play like the Oilers, or starting to. They've been playing for a few weeks like the Oilers we thought we would see at the start of the season, but it's still a team that you probably could take advantage of, and the Kings did have a 2-0 lead that they blew to end up going to overtime and lose that one in the shootout in the first place. Now, do I think it's anything to worry about if you're a Kings fan? No, probably not. This is still a team that's been playing pretty well in their losses. Sure, blowing a 2-0 lead is not what you want to see, but they still got a point out of that game, and even the 2 losses they've had in regulation over their last 5 to Seattle and Vegas, were close 1-goal losses, so they're still not getting blown out or anything like that, and generally playing pretty well at 5-on-5. Plus, the Vegas loss did come on the second half of a back-to-back, so there's a little bit of an extra excuse there, if you will. So then if the Kings are still as good as everyone thinks and the stats suggest, and they've still been winning or at least getting to overtime in a lot of their games, why move them down to the 5th spot? Well, that would be in large part because the team that jumped them up into the 4th spot in the Boston Bruins had the best week in the entire NHL. I mean, the Oilers had a pretty good week as well, but certainly as far as teams on this list are concerned or anywhere near the top 10, the Bruins stand above the rest as they win 4-1 against Buffalo, which Buffalo's had their struggles, but then 5-2 against New Jersey and 5-3 against Detroit. Now, neither of those teams are on this list right now, but both have been over the course of this season. And this is a Bruins team that did go through a stretch of having trouble scoring goals, but then just put up 14 in a 3-game stretch. So it seems like they might be back, and that could be trouble for other teams like the Panthers that had dreams of potentially stealing the division from the Bruins. Of course, the other team that was kind of starting to close in on the Bruins a little bit there while they went through that tough patch, you'll notice has not been mentioned in this video whatsoever, and that's not because we haven't gotten to them yet. Regardless of that though, I don't know what happened to the Bruins over this Christmas break, but it does seem like this team had a pretty good Christmas as they've come back from a break that they went into on a 4-game losing streak and suddenly look like the team that we saw at the start of the season, scoring the 14 goals in 3 games that I already mentioned, but also giving up just 2 goals per game in that span as well, which for the first, whatever it was, 6-7 game winning streak that they started the season on, was how much they were giving up per game pretty consistently each night, and obviously scoring more than that at the other end. Actually, over the first 6 games of the season, they were giving up closer to 1 goal per game, but either way, this team looks like they're right back to being that dominant team that we saw last year and through the first month or so of this season. However, if they do want to keep moving up this list, they're probably going to need one of the 3 teams in front of them to start slowing down, especially the team just above them in the 3rd spot, who is the one that handed them a pretty big beating just before the Christmas break in the Winnipeg Jets. Now for the Jets, they just keep chugging along doing the same thing that they've been doing since the start of December, as in the entire month of December, they did not give up more than 2 goals in regulation in a single game. They did give up 3 goals with an overtime loss to Montreal in the middle of December, but yeah, 2 or fewer goals in regulation the entire month. Now, this week, they did lose one of those games, a 2-1 loss against the Blackhawks, where they just couldn't score. Hellebuck was, again, fantastic for them, but this is a team that just is not giving up goals. I mean, shoot, it's since the 2nd of November since they gave up more than 3 goals in a game, regardless of overtime or not. So basically then, right now for the Jets, if they score a 3rd goal in a game, you can pretty much just put those 2 points in the standings, as they are very likely to end up winning it. That has kind of been the question, whether or not they do get 3 points in a game. They are sitting outside the top 10 in goals for per game, but they're still winning the vast majority of their games, and obviously a lot of that is thanks to, well, defense as well, but also, and probably more so, the now potentially leading Vezina candidate performance of Connor Hellebuck. Of course, with that being said, there is still probably one fan base that will take exception to me saying that Hellebuck might be the leading candidate for the Vezina, and that would be the fan base of the team that I have in second in the Vancouver Canucks, with Thatcher Demko, who continues to be fantastic for Vancouver in net as well. And actually, for that matter, even aside from being connected by incredible goaltending, the Canucks and Jets are also currently tied for having the best last 10-game stretch in the NHL, both 7-1-2 in their last 10. So yeah, these two teams playing fantastic hockey right now, especially when it comes to keeping the puck out of their own net. The Jets a little bit more consistently. The Canucks have that 1 loss in that 7-1-2 coming as their only game of this week, a 4-1 loss to the Flyers, though that was with DeSmith in net the night off for Demko. But yeah, both teams playing very well. The Canucks scoring a lot more than the Jets, but the Jets more consistently keeping the puck out of their net. Now for Canucks fans, to get back real quick to that potential Vezina conversation between Hellebuck and Demko, since I don't have that much more to say about a team that only played 1 game this week, there is, even if Hellebuck were to win it over Demko, still the chance that Quinn Hughes could win the Norris or Tocchet could win the Jack Adams. Now, personally, I still think Makar is probably leading the Norris race, so, feel free to hate me for that too, but I would say at this point, Tocchet is very much the front runner for the Adams, which is not something I would have put money on at the start of the season. Okay, but wait. If the Canucks and Jets are tied for the best last 10 game stretch and have the two best goaltenders in the NHL, how are they not 1 and 2? I hear all of Canada asking, or at least Western Canada certainly. Well, that's because the team that's in first place and still in first place for, I don't know, like the 5th week running now in the New York Rangers has not been that much worse. They're 7-3-0 in their last 10 games, so 2 points worse, but they're 2 loser points, so it's not that big of a difference. And they are still top 10 in just about every major category you can think of. They're top 10, just barely, 10th spot, but still top 10 in goals for per game, top 10 in goals against per game, very good penalty kill, and the best power play in the NHL. Now, sure, their advanced stats, both offensive and defense, might point to at 5-on-5 they've been potentially overachieving a bit, but at the same time, that could partially be due to the fact that they are also getting fantastic goaltending. I mean, sure, maybe not quite to the same level of either Demko or Hellebuck, but both Shesterkin and Quick have been fantastic in net for the Rangers all season long. And having two goaltenders playing as well as those two are is certainly an extra boost to the confidence in a team that if that starting goaltender goes down, they can continue playing the way that they have been to that point. And besides, did you see that save that Quick made earlier this week? I mean, I don't know how anybody's scoring on this team. Although that was actually the game that they lost 4-3 to the Panthers, but they won both of the games on either side of that, 5-1 over Tampa Bay and DC. Or, I guess, soon to be Virginia. Sorry, Capitals fans, I didn't mean to tilt you there at the end, catching strays here, but either way, this is a Rangers team that is playing very well, and sure, they've had the odd game here and there that hasn't gone their way, but even when they've lost 4-3 against Florida, and we already talked about how good Florida's been in their last little stretch of games, they're losing close games, not getting blown out, and winning the vast majority of their games and winning pretty big when it comes to the ones they played this week. But with that, as always, I'd love to know what you think down in the comment section below. If you haven't already told me what you think, what teams I got too high, too low, what your top 10 would look like. And otherwise, just have a great new year. I hope the start to year 2024 has been fantastic for the first couple hours, couple days, depending on when you're watching this. Until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken! Hopefully they've won the Winter Classic by now. Although if you're watching this as I'm releasing it, it's just getting started in the next hour or two.